This video is sponsored by CuriosityStream in partnership with my streaming service Nebula. It's almost Christmas, so I was looking to buy an ebook reader for a friend, basically a Kindle, and that threw me down a pretty damn deep and unexpected rabbit hole. As I started browsing through the options, it really just struck me. How has there been so little progress in this category? Most e-readers still have slow black and white screens that flash horribly, they have fat bezels, they use cheap plastics, and they come with 16 gigs of storage in 2022. Oh, and on top of that, you also now have ads built conveniently into your home screen. That is the progress the industry has focused on. The first Kindle came out 15 years ago, and it could do basically everything that a new Kindle can do today, plus it also had a full keyboard, headphone jack for audiobooks, 3G mobile data connectivity, an SD card slot, and a lot more. So in a lot of ways, we seem to have been going backwards, losing features instead of gaining them over the years. That is so strange. I don't know of any other personal computing device category that has been so slow to progress, which made me think that there had to be something about this industry in particular that was just completely different. So I did what every other normal person would do. I went on an obsessive journey to find out as much about this industry as I could. I got all the e-readers that I could get my hands on, a bunch of Kindle devices, a Remarkable 2, and even a color e-ink tablet running full Android and the Google Play Store, and I dug out every technical explanation and financial document that I could find to figure out who makes these things, why they suck, and whether there is any hope for a better future. And to my surprise, I think there is. I think there is a quiet revolution happening in the e-paper market right now. E-Ink Corporation, this single company that makes almost all the screens in this industry, recently had its share price jump by about 10 to 20x, quietly pushing them from being an obscure component maker to now being worth as much as Asus, their Taiwanese compatriot. Also, after about a decade of there being no competition to Amazon's rule on the entire e-ink market, there's recently been a whole explosion of new devices from new brands on the market now too. Huawei, Xiaomi, Lenovo, Sharp, and many other established giants have all just started launching their e-paper devices all of a sudden, while Remarkable, as well as Onyx and a ton of other smaller players are making real progress too. So, what the hell is e-paper and e-ink? Why has innovation in this industry been so damn slow? And where is this new explosion of devices and technologies going to take us next? Already by the 1970s, researchers in Xerox PARC experimented with ideas around electronic paper. Instead of a display that emitted light, they wanted to make one that would reflect it like real paper, making it perfectly visible when a bright light, like the sun for example, hit it, while also consuming much less power. In 1997, MIT scientists in the US then started commercializing e-ink, the first successful type of display technology that is also the most popular one to date. In an e-ink display, tiny capsules are filled with black and white pigments that are electronically charged and float around in a sort of oil. Applying a positive or a negative charge below or above them pushes the various pigments to the desirable side, making the screen appear either black or white. Fit enough of these tiny capsules next to each other and a grid under it that can quickly change its charge, and voila! You now have an e-ink display. Like with any new technology, it took quite a while to bring this into actual mass production, but in 2004 the first e-reader arrived to the market from Sony, and then in 2007 the first Kindle was launched by Amazon, and their appeal became obvious to consumers pretty quickly. Lots of competitors piled on, making devices with a wide range of features and price points, and by the early 2010s even early versions of color e-ink were introduced too. Besides the e-ink company, others saw the appeal of e-paper displays too, and multiple competitors launched their own competing technologies as well. Qualcomm, for example, made a big bet on a technology called Mirasol, going so far as to making their own smartwatch with the technology called the TOC, while so-called transflective LCDs like the ones used in Pebble devices were popularized too. These competing display types all worked in completely different ways from the original e-ink. For example, the screen on the Pebble had no pigments in it, but was instead simply an LCD screen that worked like a one-way mirror, reflecting the light that was directed at it, while also allowing a backlight to shine through it, but all tried to achieve pretty much the same thing. A screen that was focused more on outdoor visibility and battery consumption than pretty colors and high refresh rates. This is what I think of as the first golden age of e-paper technologies. There were a lot of device types, a lot of display types, a lot of experimentation, and none of it ever really went anywhere significantly. Turns out, while I and like 7 other nerds really loved our Pebble watches and swore that the 10 days of battery life and whatever were totally worth all the trade-offs, the vast majority of consumers far preferred the responsiveness and vibrancy of a more traditional display on most of their devices. Technologies like Mirasol never really took off, and most other display types like the transflective LCDs, for example, were relegated to niche use cases like outdoor bike computers. From the first golden age of e-paper experimentation, the simple e-reader was the only device that the masses actually embraced, and there e-ink displays were the clear and only winners. You didn't need fast refresh rates when you were reading text, and all of the other advantages of low power consumption, great black and white contrast, and so on just made the most sense on this category. Not only that, the e-reader market itself also saw some brutal consolidation, with Amazon basically eventually wiping the floor with just about all of its competitors. The retail giant eventually realized that all the Kindle was a vehicle to sell people ebooks from their store, so they stripped every feature they possibly could out of their devices and made them as cheap as possible, selling them at or sometimes even below cost just to make the money back from selling the actual ebooks. No competitor could keep up with that, and Amazon had the biggest store, and so in a few years, this golden age and explosion of e-paper technology, at least in the West, got reduced to basically a single company making a single device type using a single technology from a single display maker. Some smaller players survived in some specialized markets like Japan, but the overall global market got almost completely reduced to its least ambitious and least competitive state possible. Amazon had an effective monopoly because of their store, while e-ink had an effective monopoly because of all of their patents, so nobody had to compete at all, and we basically entered a decade of stagnation. I mean, literally, I think the only feature that got added meaningfully in the 15 years since the first Kindle came out was a backlight. Well, actually, it's a front light because e-ink displays are not transparent, so you have to illuminate them from the front with little LEDs placed into the bezels. But yeah, very little else happened until, I'd argue, the late 2010s, when 2 separate major trends started to pick up, which are now transporting us potentially into a second golden age of this technology. First, in 2017, a small Norwegian startup called Remarkable brought a new product to market after a successful Kickstarter campaign and years of tinkering. It was a tablet that was not just for reading, but primarily for writing. Now, as with many other categories, Sony had technically built a similar product and brought it to market earlier, but Remarkable arguably made this technology much more accessible to the mass market, with better marketing and a simpler and more focused product philosophy. E-ink turns out to work great with a digital pen, as each little e-ink container reacts to an electric charge, and you can basically just make the pen pull the little black pigments up right away with almost no input lag and no need to update the rest of the display. Remarkable also managed to get industry giant Wacom to provide their tech to make a pressure-sensitive pen possible on their devices too. They made a custom Linux operating system that was super user-friendly for note-taking and drawing. They built cloud services to sync things to and from the device, etc. In other words, they made a well-rounded product, and they started kicking off a whole new product category. It took multiple years and a second-generation product for Remarkable to really get taken seriously, but now it clearly has been. The company now has a few hundred employees according to Crunchbase and has raised a significant amount of money. Amazon, Xiaomi, Lenovo, Huawei, Onyx, and many others are jumping on the category that Remarkable has created, which seems to show real belief in this form factor, and similar to the early e-reader days, everyone is trying to figure out just how big this market is and what the winning strategy in it could be. Is the winning strategy to put a full Android operating system, the Google Play Store, and the whole kitchen sink on the tablet like Onyx is doing? Is the much more focused and streamlined approach of Remarkable the right one? Or will Amazon just win again because apparently all people want is just to read Kindle ebooks on their devices? We'll have to wait and see, but clearly the device makers are now gearing up to fight this out. And the second big change is that e-ink screens finally found their place outside the world of consumer electronics as well by becoming viable commercial signs. This has been many years in the making too, but retailers in the last few years are increasingly using them as smart price tags that can be updated wirelessly, while their use as, for example, outdoor signs in public spaces is picking up too, and in these applications, color became especially important as highlighting and attracting attention is crucially important. So the e-ink company finally got a good reason to start working on color e-ink again. I mean, they had color e-ink panels back in like 2009, but those didn't really go anywhere due to, I guess, a lack of interest for the most part. But now they actually came out with 3 different types of color e-ink panels starting in 2020. The first approach is to keep the black and white panel like in normal e-ink screens, but to add a simple RGB filter over it. The second one is mixing in cyan, magenta, and yellow particles into the capsules themselves and then trying to manipulate them with much more complicated voltage regulations to mix out any combination of colors that way. And meanwhile, the third is to keep black and white as the primary colors, but to then add 1 or maybe 2 colors like red or yellow, which don't give you the full spectrum, but do work as simple highlights. As you can imagine, each of these technologies has its own benefits and drawbacks. The RGB filter tech is used in tablets because while they have the worst colors, they also just refresh just as fast as black and white screens, while the screens that use mixed pigments are mostly used in commercial signs that are mostly static due to having much better looking colors, but also having really janky refresh cycles. Still, despite all the complications and drawbacks, color is suddenly very much a thing in e-ink, and of course pens are too, and that plus the new brands that are entering this space is very much giving this industry a whole lot more energy. As I've already said at the beginning of this video, the stock price of the e-ink corporation has increased by 10 to 20x in the last few years due to rising revenues, and the company last year also had gross profit margins of almost 44%. That is an insanely high figure in the display industry, but of course, unlike with any other display type, the e-ink company has basically complete monopoly of the technology through their patents, so they can charge basically as much as they want. That said, this monopoly on the display technology could soon be coming to an end as well, which could add further fuel to the fire of this second golden age of e-paper technologies. See, given that e-ink got started in 1996, or about 28 years ago, and given that patent protections expire usually after 20 years, I suspect that much of their technology should have recently lost its patent protection already, and competitors should be allowed to make e-ink screens too. In fact, a new and promising type of e-paper display called DES has recently been introduced from China, which uses a similar but potentially improved version of the e-ink technology. It is not quite as polished as e-ink yet, but who knows, maybe in a few years we will have some real alternatives, further adding even more fuel to this trend. Now, to be clear, after having used many of the most advanced versions of this new idea that are on the market right now, I am still a little bit skeptical about the total addressable market of this category. Yes, there is something inexplicably fun about the combination of e-pen and e-paper and even the promise of color. But I'm also kind of reminded a little bit of my Pebble. That device had a sort of magic and real benefit like crazy long battery life to it as well, and it had a rabid fanbase including yours truly too. Still, in the end, e-paper watches never really became a mass market category, and similarly, I feel like there's a good chance that despite all of these advantages and advancements, e-paper tablets, even with color, might just not be able to convince enough people to switch from their iPads or other similar devices to make a real dent here either. But there is enough change in the industry where we just can't predict any of the outcomes accurately now. But one thing we do know for certain is that with the holidays being around, it's not just the best time to buy an e-reader, but also to get a subscription to Nebula, because there's a limited time discount on that right now. We currently have reduced pricing for the holiday from our partner CuriosityStream, making it so that you can get both services for less than $12 for an entire year. That is less than $1 a month for both services. If you've ever wanted to get a subscription, now is the best time, and not just because of the discount, but also because I've just released the final episode of our Nebula original series, Technorama, as well. Technorama is my big film analysis series that focuses on how technology is portrayed in movies. In each episode, we pick a certain era or maybe a genre and discuss what's unique about the technologies in those films, what real-world events and trends inspired them, and so on. The last episode focused on spy movies like the James Bond franchise, and we dug out a bunch of real-world spy gadgets and interviewed experts to figure out what there is to know about them. Other episodes include deep dives into spaceships, Japanese robot movies, jetpacks, and more. And combined, we now have 8 full episodes with more than 2 hours to watch, perfect for the holidays. Nebula helps us fund these big original series that would be quite difficult to do right here on YouTube. Nebula, of course, also hosts all of our regular YouTube videos, ad-free and early access as well, and it's owned and created by creators directly, so signing up there really helps us out.